Hello everybody, Turbodactyl here, and welcome to another Jurassic Plastic review of yet another Carnegie Collection scale model dinosaur from the 80s and early 90s. You know, the kind of stuff I usually do, right? I wanted to finally get to one of not only my favorite Carnegie Collection dinosaurs of all time, but I really can't pick one, but one of my favorite dinosaur figures in general of all time, and that is the classic lime green and sky blue Carnegie Collection Corythosaurus, originally released in 1993. I want to point out that I am not alone in thinking this is one of the best of the Carnegie Collection. There are very well-known, famous paleo artists like John Conway, who did this gorgeous painting of Corythosaurus using the Carnegie Collection colors, who, has stated, and a few other people have stated, that this is one of their favorites of the line. Why did I wait so long to do this one? I wanted to do this review justice. I am going to try to make it relatively quick. I don't want to get into too many little minute details here and there. But I wanted to take this opportunity, since in my recent videos have been talking a lot about paint applications and the way that companies modify paint applications through multiple production runs in order to save costs. I wanted to use this opportunity to explore that a little further, because I just recently got around, I finally found one at a good price, to buying the newer version with reduced paint application of Corythosaurus from the Carnegie Collection, which you can see right here. And obviously there's a lot of differences here. So I want to kind of break these down into two sections. We'll talk about the sculpt and talk a little bit about the context and the history of where this falls in the line, and then also take a specific look at the paint application and how that changed between the two different versions of Corythosaurus. There's more than just two versions. There's some little details that changed here and there, but the two primary versions, the original one and what we can call the color vinyl era Corythosaurus. So without further ado, let's take a look at one of the best Carnegie Collection figures of all time, and one of the more underrepresented hadrosaurs in toy lines in general compared to how famous it is. Everybody knows Corythosaurus, but there haven't been too many figures of Corythosaurus. So let's take a look. I want to start by taking a general look at the sculpt. When this came out in 1993, it was kind of major in the Carnegie line. It was one of the first waves of Carnegie figures. Obviously, the original waves of Carnegie came out in 1988, so this is only a couple years after the line began. And obviously, the first two waves were very old school in appearance. You can go look at my other videos, take a look at my video about the first generation of Carnegie figures. You'll notice about them that they're all in a little bit more of an old school pose, sculpted a little bit less dynamically, although more dynamic than I think some people give them credit for. But they're not exactly in action poses generally. And obviously the original ones had much duller paint applications, much duller paint schemes and colorways, a lot of, browns, grays, sometimes with like a weird goldish kind of finish to it. That didn't change much with subsequent releases. You had things like the Pachycephalosaurus, which was in a more dynamic pose, but how could you not put Pachycephalosaurus in a headbutting pose? And obviously Deinonychus, they're well known for being a very active dinosaur. Almost like in the 80s, that was considered almost like the exception to the general rule, at least among the general population, because you were still seeing old-fashioned depictions of dinosaurs, and then Deinonychus, which is like its own new thing, not quite realizing that the dinosaur renaissance had happened, and that applies to all dinosaurs. Spinosaurus and Iguanodon came out in 1992, the year before Corythosaurus. They were generally still pretty conservative, pretty old school looking. Corythosaurus was really one of the first modern looking, up-to-date hadrosaur figures, hadrosaur toys of any kind that had ever really been released. This was kind of a revelation to me as a kid. When this came out, this was sort of like, oh, the Carnegie Collection is going to take this seriously. Right? They're going to update, they're going to kind of progress with the times as we learn more about dinosaurs, and not just keep coming out with retrosaurs. you can see compared to some of the other Carnegie line hadrosaurs like the Maiasaura and the Parasaurolophus, the pose and general attitude of this is much, much different. It comes straight out of like, a Greg Paul drawing of the late 80s or early 90s. It would be right at home in Jurassic Park. In fact, the Corythosaurs that featured much later in, I guess, Jurassic Park 3, I don't know if they were even as accurate as this one. It's got this really, really high tail, straight as an arrow, right? Just like we were kind of re-envisioning hadrosaurs and to a lesser extent dinosaurs in general as being. It's got that slope in the back with a retracted upright neck. It's alert. It's in a running posture, right? You can see that the back foot here is sculpted, raised like it's about to kind of push up off the ground, while the front hand is lifted like it's taking a step. You can kind of, I think this is the way it's intended to go. It also kind of balances just as well there if you wanted to put it in almost like it's doing a little turn, like pushing off with its back foot, angling forward, putting its head down a little bit like it's about to ram through some underbrush or something. But it's in a very dynamic pose. The sculpt is subtle. The scales are very small and bumpy, which it's a hadrosaur. They should be. These are probably too big. Nowadays a lot of dinosaur toys get criticized for having a lack of detail. I feel like the major modern problem with a lot of dinosaur figures nowadays is over detail. Detail added there just so the sculptor can show off that does not reflect what a real dinosaur at like 140 or 135 scale would look like as seen from that distance. You wouldn't really be able to notice any scales on this thing if you saw an actual Corythosaurus from, 50 feet away. They're tiny. So one of the reasons, and I've talked about this before, that I like Forrest Rogers' sculpting style is it really kind of goes minimal on the scale detail, but goes all in on skin wrinkles. And the skin wrinkle detail here is beautiful. You can see around the arm, there's this little kind of bunched up skin there, stretching skin texture, wrinkles, and things along the bottom. And on this side, it's a little more obvious. Here where the leg is pushing forward. The muscles on this side are more well defined because these are the ones that are sort of like, this one's propelling off the ground, so the muscle's bulging here, where it's not bulging as much there. This arm is supporting the weight. You can see the shoulder blade is popped out a little bit more on this side. The wrinkles here demonstrate that like it gives it that sense of action, like it's actually holding the animal's weight, where this one is lifted up off the ground. It's got more of a crease here because it's pushing forward. It's reaching forward. It's not supporting any weight, so you can't really see the shoulder blade popping, through the soft tissue much there. But Forrest Rogers is really good at making naturalistic and not schematic depictions of animals, right? Some thought really went into the muscle action here. And the overall pose, the overall posture, the style of the figure really was one of the first modern hadrosaur figures that we ever saw. But to me, what really made this figure stand out when it came out in 1993 was the paint job. Like I said, previous Carnegie figures, the original releases were all dull gray, dull yellow, dull green, dull brown. These colors like out of the 50s, out of like a Zallinger mural, which is great. I love those figures. They're some of my favorite ones. I'm really nostalgic for them. But in the early 90s, paleo art was moving away from that direction. We were seeing dinosaurs as more active. We were seeing more dinosaurs as colorful, as bird-like. This came out the same year as Jurassic Park, and obviously Safari noticed that and said, well, we've really got to update the way that we are portraying dinosaurs to match what the public is now going to expect to see from dinosaurs. One of the ways they did that was by emphasizing color. Look at a lot of the figures that came out from Safari, 1993, 1994, Carnegie Collection and otherwise. We also had the dinosaurs of China around that time. We had the large-scale Safari Velociraptor with the tiger stripes, all very dynamic and all very colorful. And the Corythosaurus is probably the most colorful of them all. It really, really pops with this bright lime green color. painted over with these duller green stripes, and the bright blue, sky blue underside. I remember as a kid looking at this figure in the catalog and thinking, wow, that is just a stunning, modern-looking dinosaur figure. I have to have this. In fact, that was the first year that I ordered Carnegie Collection figures by mail rather than getting them at the store, because I couldn't wait for this to show up at my local stores that carried these. I had my parents, send in a check. I think I got this one and the Iguanodon and maybe something else at that same time in 1993 out of a catalog. So this is probably one of the first off the production line. I'm kind of happy to have like a close, at least semi-close to being an original production run version of this, since it's one of my favorites. The paint application on the original version is out of control. If you want to learn more about paint applications and how they can be an expense for the company, why they're almost a liability for the company, go back and look at some of my previous videos about paint application. But just take a look at this and think about how much detail went into it and how many layers of paint, how much time it took to create just one of these figures. First of all, we've got the base coat. This is not color vinyl. You can look, mine's, a little dinged up from over the years. I used to play with this when I was a kid. I'm surprised it's not more dinged up. But it's a dark gray underneath, dark gray plastic. It's pretty inflexible. I can't really bend, other than the tip of the tail. This doesn't bend very much at all. It's pretty hard plastic. But it is dark gray plastic underneath here. The base coat is sort of this yellowish green. You can see that on the face, and you can see that showing through a little bit here, like in the crease. That's that yellowish green. So that would have been the base coat. You got to cover the whole thing in paint, let it dry. It was not airbrushed. You can see almost nothing on this figure appears to have been airbrushed on. So this was like painted on with a brush from regular paints that they would have been using in the factory at that time. And then you have a detail applied. So you've got two different colors of dark green. You've got this duller green here with a few dark green highlights, and then all that dark green on the face. These spots here on the face, these bigger stripes here on the neck, are that darker green. So that's two additional layers. So what you've got to do is paint on some of these dark green highlights, spots. Probably at that same time you'd also apply the light blue underside. Let all that dry. That's a second coat of paint. Now you're going to go back and do the top details. You're going to do these darker green stripes. You're going to do the details like the claws, toenails, probably the darker green on the face. The crest alone has several different layers of paint. It's got the green at the bottom, then it's got a blue, two different colors of blue here. You can see that more easily on this side. It's got a lighter blue and then a darker blue. Same with the body. The lighter blue is the belly, and then this is actually a darker blue for the spots, so it's like a highlight color of blue. You can see the contrast between these two blues right there, where there's a darker blue spot and a lighter blue. Two different paints, two different paint operations. Each one of these is adding time and expense to finish the figure. This is a first production run, so they went all out. It probably took hours to fully produce one of these figures. This is not like mass-produced off an assembly line. You had a person with paints sitting there, applying each layer, setting them aside, painting the next one, letting it dry, coming back, doing all the second layers, letting it dry. Very time intensive means very cost intensive, and a lot of different colors of paint to do. This would have ridiculously increased the cost to produce a figure. It's no wonder that later on, Safari simplified this. And before I move on to the next one, I just want to take a look and show, despite all those layers of paint, most of it is not too sloppy. There's a few areas of sloppily applied paint here, like this blue on the neck seems like it came up a little bit too high. But the eyes are nice and crisp. On the crest, it might at first glance appear to be a little lopsided and uneven, but I feel like that's almost a lighting effect. These early Carnegies were painted like you would produce a painting on a canvas with a sort of intended lighting effect built into the color scheme. You can see that really well here on the Corythosaurus with these little white dots on the side of the beak. And a lot of people say, like, what is that supposed to be? Like, I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be glare from the sun reflecting off its shiny beak. This is a little painting just produced in 3D. It's really amazing. All right, so how does that compare with the newer version of Corythosaurus? First of all, you can see that the sculpt is basically the same. This seems to have been retooled a little bit. I doubt that they produced a fully new tool. I think they probably just modified the original one. It may look a little more detailed, but that's because it's actually lacking layers of paint. I neglected to mention the lime green wash that went over all this, which would have been the last layer of paint to go on. This one does have a little bit of a wash, but it's just airbrushed on here. Airbrush paint is obviously not as thick. It's going to allow the details of the sculpt to show through a little bit. So on this version, you are going to see those sculpt details really, really shine through more than the multiple layers of paint allow you to do on the original. However, what you're sacrificing there is just how nice the paint looks. This is pretty much all airbrushed on. Some of these look like they're just glooped on a little bit, like blip, 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 with a little paintbrush. The details are still pretty sharp, but they're almost a little too sharp. I don't think they look as painterly or naturalistic as they do on the original, which I really prefer. Most of the same colors are technically here. It's still got that light blue on the bottom. The base color is a little more dull green than the nice bright lime green that really popped for me and that I really noticed when I was a kid. It's not really present here. And you really only have 2 or 3 different shades of green. You've got this lighter green, a little bit of airbrush along the back, the really dark green for the stripes, and then the base color, which is this dull green. The crest has also been simplified where it's really just blue with a little bit of dirty green mixed into it, not like the multiple layers. Here, those like subtle lighting sort of influenced effects, like the layers in the crest and the shine on the beak, have been eliminated. So once again, it's just a much simplified paint application. Instead of taking multiple hours to finish, like the original, this probably just had, maybe 2 runs through being painted. The paint barely even touches each other, the different paints anywhere on here. So like you could have done the bottom, the stripes, the blue dots, most of the face at the same time. And then to finish it off, just little airbrush down the back and almost 1 and done, maybe 1 or 2 and done. I said that the sculpt is pretty much the same on the newer version. There are a couple exceptions. For example, on the bottom, the stamp has been retooled. So I did not show the stamp on this one, but just to show you, it was a little unusual because you can see here it says Corythosaurus Safari Ltd. Made in China with the CE mark under that. There's no mention of the Carnegie Collection on here like there is in almost every other Carnegie figure. It doesn't even have the year that it was made, which is very unusual. I see this show up on eBay every so often where they're like, year question mark. Like, I don't even know. Like I said, if you look at catalogs, if you don't believe me, you can look at any catalog. I have some posted on my website that show that this did come out in 1993. It was not probably not a delayed release, because there are even some catalogs from 1993 that show a drawing of this instead of the finished model. So it may not have even been ready to go and ship out until maybe a little later in 1993. I don't remember what month I bought this, or at least ordered it from the catalog. Yeah, it was brand new in 1993. Now, on this one, interestingly, you can see that they did update the imprint stamp on the bottom, and it says Corythosaurus, copyright 1991, the Carnegie. I know this didn't come out in 1991. I don't know where they got that number from. I'm wondering if maybe the concept was produced in 1991, and they're kind of counting it back to that, or maybe it was even sculpted in 1991, although based on how modern it looks compared to the 1991 releases, which were the Carnegie Mosasaurus and Elasmosaurus. So just compare those. I mean, talk about 2 old school prehistoric animal designs. It seems very odd that this would have been produced at the same time that those were coming out, although maybe there was a backlog and they were just churning molds out to save some for later. I don't know. It's possible that this was sculpted in 1991, I guess. the original model did release in 1993, which makes this stamp kind of bizarre. I'm not sure why they went with that. Maybe it's just a mistake. Maybe they screwed up. It also has the model number on here. So the model number was included on the imprint stamps of Carnegie figures between about 1999 and the early 2000s, like 2002 or so. That can really give you a time when this version was produced. So this did not come out right away with the other color vinyl editions of the figures. A lot of people kind of have this idea, I think it incorrectly said this on the Carnegie Wikipedia page for a while, that all of the models switched to color vinyl in 1996, stopped being fully painted. That's not technically correct. Some of them, especially the ones that were relatively new at that time, did come out quite a bit later. I would guess that this one came out in 99 or even 2000. I don't remember ever seeing the new version of Corythosaurus when I was out shopping for Carnegie figures, when I still bought them in stores, and after about 2000 I kind of stopped collecting them for a long time. So I'm guessing this is a figure dated to around the year 2000, maybe 2001 or so, when they finally got around to issuing a color vinyl. And good for them for keeping the original one in production for that long. I don't know how many production runs they did of the original version. Maybe it just didn't sell super well and they had a lot of old stock, so they didn't need to update it. I'm not really sure. I do know that some of the paint on later versions was a little sloppier. But still, if you can track down the original one, in my opinion, that is the best version of the Safari Corythosaurus, and probably the best Corythosaurus figure that's really ever been produced by pretty much any company. I mean, I do like the new PNSO one, but the proportions just seem so weird to me. The head is like gigantic on that thing. It's like a bobblehead. Compare it to this. If you compare this to a real Corythosaurus skeleton, you can see that the proportions on this are much, much better. And even though it's not really scientifically accurate 100% anymore, it still really does hold up. In terms of its general pose, the skin texture, everything we know about hadrosaurs, this is not too far off the mark. I think the beak probably would nowadays need to be extended down a little bit to give it a little bit of that shovel bill rather than duck bill that they had that we're kind of discovering nowadays with better specimens. And obviously, I think the most notorious thing would be the front feet, which, based on Edmontosaurus, may have had that hoof, at least definitely not separate little fingers like you can kind of see sculpted here. Although, oddly enough, on my version, these are all painted together almost like it has a hoof. That's, I don't know if that's just sloppy paintwork or a little prescient on the part of the producers and the part of Safari at that time. The newer version does have separately painted nails. I don't know if you can see that. It's a little blurry. But they're separately, just little teeny tiny lines for fingernails on there, which actually is a little bit less accurate nowadays. One other weird thing about this one that makes me think it was retooled a little beyond just the belly stamp is the pointier beak. Now, being that that would be keratin, I don't know if that's more or less accurate, just a little different. So there you have it. These are two versions of one of my favorite Carnegie figures, the Corythosaurus. Not a lot of good Corythosauruses out there still. If you don't have one in your collection, it might be worth tracking one of these guys down on eBay. They do tend to go for a lot of money, probably because there are not a lot of options for Corythosaurus in modern lines, but not a lot of people are paying that close attention to the differences. So I think it's kind of a toss-up which version you can get for what amount of money. I've seen these go for anywhere around $15 to up to $40 for both versions. Like, people aren't really distinguishing between them. And, you know, some people may prefer this one. It might be a little easier to repaint this one that's got the details, you know, on bare plastic here already. It's basically not even fully painted yet. Some people might appreciate the paint release style of the original a little bit more. But if you keep an eye out, mark a saved search, and be patient, you can eventually add this beautiful, beautiful figure to your collection too. Thank you for joining me on Jurassic Plastic, and I will see you next time.